Hi guys, welcome back to Sacred Vedic Astrology. My name is Samantha and I feel truly so blessed and so grateful to be a professional Vedic astrologer. So today we have a really fun and really informative chart analysis video to get into. So we're going to do the chart analysis of one of our most notorious astrologers from back in the day. So this astrologer was essentially practicing astrology at a time when it said only about 15 or so people knew how to cast and read an astrological charts at this time. And it is going to be Evangeline Adams, who was this really notorious astrologer. She was also one of the first women to be well known in the realm of astrology. They tried to send her away to jail 3 different times because she was practicing astrology and it was illegal back then to partake in fortune telling. So they kind of, meshed in astrology with fortune telling and psychics, and they were trying to tell her that she was, doing something that was illegal. And she notoriously won this court case because she told them that it was just a science and she had gotten down the exact science of astrology. And so they had to let her go because they're like, okay, this isn't fortune telling, this is a science. It's pretty iconic. She is one of our most notorious astrologers from back in the day. She had a radio show. She worked with some of the top people at the time, Joseph Campbell, J.P. Morgan. Yes, J.P. Morgan was very much into astrology. He has a quote where he says, "Millionaires don't use astrology, billionaires do." So J.P. Morgan had a high respect for astrology, actually. Not many people know that. So yeah, and I guess that he was one of her clients. So we're going to go into a really interesting chart analysis where we're going to see what shows the Vedic astrology chart of a notorious astrologer. How can we see the astrological, metaphysical career, but also how can we see this more innovative and fame-producing career as well too? Because yes, we can see both things, of course. And also we can see these interesting aspects of imprisonment and enemies and the legal system, which also does come up in her chart analysis as well too. So really excited. I find some of my favorite videos actually to do, or some of my favorite charts to analyze, are charts where someone was in a more spiritual, metaphysical career, because it's something so minute in chart analysis that we have to look to, right? It's something so specific, so niche, but of course it's going to come up in the Vedic astrological chart as always. So really excited for this video, and I hope you guys enjoy. So in the next screen, I'm going to pull up her Vedic sidereal astrological charts, and we're going to study the astrology of one of our most famous, notorious astrologers. Yes, it's very meta, but I love it. All right, let's get into it. All right, guys, so here we have Evangeline's Vedic sidereal astrological chart. Really excited. So a few things that are important for us to note as we're going through chart analysis is she was essentially a pioneer in popularizing and legitimizing the practice of astrology in American culture at the time. Essentially, they saw forecasting or astrology as something that was more taboo at the time, and she really brought it into society as something that was more normalized, and she was trying to show it as a legitimate science and a legitimate practice. So she was really this pioneer in astrology. She was one of the first women to really popularize astrology. So we're going to go into the aspects of the chart that show us how is someone going to be a professional astrologer through the chart, but also we're getting that sort of innovative energy into the career as well too, which I'll show you guys how we're going to see that. And we also get this sort of fame producing aspect of the career as well too, right? She wasn't just this astrologer who was, not known by many. She was widely known. She had scandals in the career. She was almost imprisoned. Right, there's a lot that was going on in her career. So that's going to be the influence of some powerful planets into the career, right? And maybe some more innovative planets, innovative energy, which we will get into as well. All right, so let us start the chart analysis by going into the first house as always. So when we are doing Vedic chart analysis, I like to always start from the Lagna, from the ascendant, to give us an understanding of the life experience, right? What's sitting in the first house? Where's the first house lord going? Because wherever the first house lord gets activated, there's going to be major themes of that house in someone's life story. So Pisces Lagna, Pisces ascendant, which means that the whole chart is ruled by Jupiter, right? Something that's very interesting is she also has Neptune right on the ascendant. So Neptunian influence is metaphysics, spirituality, kind of like differentiating between what's real and what's an illusion is a lot of that Neptune energy. So, her whole life was very much about metaphysics, spirituality, kind of deciphering what's real, what's an illusion, right? We get that Neptune in the first house. And then the first house lord is going to be in that 12th house of Aquarius, right? So we get Jupiter in the 12th, near Venus, near Ketu, near Mercury, and the Bhrigu Bindu point is actually also in that 12th house. So this is a lot of energy activated in the 12th house, right? That's a lot. It's a lot of energy to hold in a very moksha, spiritually influenced house. So that will show us that a major theme in her life is always going to be activated through the 12th house, right? Through spirituality, through enlightenment, through trying to raise consciousness collectively. All of that energy is very active, and Jupiter is there, and Jupiter is 20 degrees, right? Ketu is about 12 degrees. So that's like an 8-degree orb of conjunction where Ketu is now very close to the ascendant ruler, right? So whatever planets, whatever energy comes near the first house lord planet, right next to Jupiter, is going to also bring that influence of that planetary energy into someone's life experience. So it's not just the first house and the 12th house of spirituality, metaphysics. Also, 12th house does rule imprisonment, quite literally, and she was almost imprisoned like 3 times. They tried to send her away to jail. So that's an interesting sort of minute aspect that we can pick up, right? Quite literally, 12th house is imprisonment. And that was also a major theme in her life as well, too, with all these planetary energies active in the 12th house, right? But more than anything, the 12th house is going to be that moksha spiritual influence. It's also the dream world. A lot of people with heavy 12th house placements can have a lot of like weird dreams, psychic dreams, especially if Ketu is there. So now we get this influence of Ketu right near the first house ruler. So now this is giving a lot of Ketu influence into her life, into her energy, into her personality. We also get Ketu in conjunction with Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, right? All of these planets are getting that Ketu influence now. And Ketu in Vedic astrology is spirituality, it's metaphysics, it's astrology, it's the other worlds. Ketu is also kind of elusive and illusionary. So there's also this aspect of this chart with Neptune on the ascendant, strong Ketu influence with all these personal planets of some sort of like questions about what's real, what's an illusion. And there were some people that had some things to say about her as an astrologer. I believe like Aleister Crowley, which is just wild, came out and said some questionable things about her and her astrological practice. And they tried to send her away to jail different times, trying to figure out, what's real, what's the truth, what's going on with this woman, right? So there's also a lot of this like elusive, illusionary influence in the chart as well too, which is very interesting. That's that Ketu influence. That's that Neptunian influence. People are trying to figure out what's real. Is she real? Is she a fraud? Is she a fortune teller? What's going on? So there's also a lot of that influence in the Vedic astrological chart. You'll find that Neptune and Ketu are 2 energies that will give confusion and sort of haziness and sometimes like deceit about who someone really is. What's the truth? What's going on? It's confusing in some regard. Okay, so then we get that Ketu influence into the first house ruler, right? So now it's almost as if she has Ketu right there sitting with her first house ruling planet. So now she's even more spiritual. She's more interested in metaphysics. She's more interested in astrology. This is a, astrological spiritual lifetime because it's not just the first house lord in the 12th house, which is a moksha house. It's also near Ketu, which is a very spiritual influence, right? It's karmic, it's the past lives, and that's coming together with 3 personal planets, but also 3 benefics. So we actually get this like benefic influence into the 12th house, which is going to be positive when she goes towards 12th house things, right? So when they tried to imprison her, benefics in the 12th house, it didn't work, right? And when she goes towards, writing about astrology, communicating about astrology, Mercury, Ketu, Jupiter, Venus, there's going to be benefic influence because of the nature of having Jupiter, Venus, Mercury, 3 benefics in the 12th house. So it's actually a really powerful, strong 12th house, right? It's not like there's 3 malefics in the 12th house. There's actually benefics in that 12th house. 12th house is also film, photography, television, debts, expenses. Those are other meanings of the 12th house. So I tried to research a little bit. Did she have debt? Was there some theme of like debts or expenses? I couldn't find too much about that, but I'm sure there was some point in her life of debts and expenses were a theme as well too. That's also another aspect of the 12th house. Okay, so first house lord is in the 12th house, moksha, spirituality, imprisonments, film, photography, television, debts, expenses. I'm just giving you guys all the themes of that 12th house, meditation, spirituality. It's all there. And then the chart ruler is near Ketu, metaphysics, spirituality, karmic experiences from the past lives, and also Ketu is where we have a lot of natural gifts that we can just pull out of our back pockets. I did a video on Rahu with the moon versus Ketu with the moon, and I talked about those with a Ketu moon aspect. It's very easy for them to pull out the psychic, the intuition, all of that stuff is almost like it just sits in their back pocket and they're like, oh, that's so easy for me to access. Ketu is like an ease of access and something that comes very naturally from previous lifetimes. So now there's like that Ketu influence with Mercury. So she has a gift with writing, expression, communication, and then Jupiter, philosophy, spirituality, metaphysics, guides, gurus, teachers. Near Venus, right? Venus is creativity as well. So then we get this like natural ability for all of these planets because of Ketu. It's like, oh, I've been there, sort of done that in the past life experiences, right? I'm sure she had some important guides or gurus or teachers as well with that first house lord. Jupiter next to Ketu, next to Venus, next to Mercury in the 12th house as well. All right, so also the first house lord is now near Mercury as well, right? So then it's also a lifetime of expression and communication and speaking and writing, and she wrote and published many books, and she even had a radio show about astrology, right? So now there's that mercurial influence with Jupiter, with Venus, with Ketu. And you'll find that a Mercury-Ketu conjunction, this is pretty tight, right? So Mercury is about 8 degrees, Ketu is 12 degrees, tight Ketu-Mercury conjunction. When someone like speaks about astrology or speaks about metaphysical things, it comes very naturally because that's Mercury with Ketu, right? And also a Mercury-Ketu conjunction can give someone this very like natural ability to channel psychic information, tap in with the psychic because that's Ketu, and then Mercury is the communication and the expression. So there's all of that energy, and then also we get the Bhrigu Bindu point, which is like the fated sort of point of the chart, and it's also in the 12th house. So when we see a lot of energy activated in moksha houses, 4, 8, 12, someone is going to have a lot of this interest towards spirituality and metaphysics because moksha houses are the houses of spiritual liberation, essentially, right? And this is 3 benefics in the 12th house of moksha, and then Ketu, which is even more spiritual in that 12th house. Also, I find that a Ketu-Jupiter aspect gives someone a natural ability to teach others about like their own philosophical, spiritual ideas as well too. They're very naturally in tune with like teaching and giving spiritual insights and wisdom as well. All right. So that's really, really powerful. Really active 12th house, which, you're going to see if someone is a famous astrologer. There's tons of energy activated there. Okay. Now, this is a more minute aspect of analysis that we wouldn't be able to get without the outer planets, but Uranus in astrology, Uranus in astrology is the indication of astrology, quite literally. So Uranus is here in the 4th house, and it aspects the 10th house directly by opposition. So the 10th house is the career. Uranus is strange, unconventional, and astrology, and now it's aspecting the 10th of the career. Okay, so now we get Uranus influence, which gives that sort of strangeness to the career, which I spoke about earlier, very unconventional. So it gives us like unconventional elements to, yes, her upbringing, her home life, but also her career because of its direct opposition. All right, so yeah, an astrologer is going to have Uranus onto their 10th house, astrology aspecting the career. Also, if we go to the 10th house to see how is this an astrological career, 10th house is Sagittarius, which means that the 10th house gets ruled by Jupiter again. So the 1st house lord is in the 12th house, and now the 10th house lord is also in the 12th house. So now her career, her public image, her reputation is ruled by the 12th house of moksha, of spirituality, of imprisonment, of solitude. All of that energy is now activated through the 10th house lord. Also foreign travels and foreign lands. So I'm sure she did a lot of traveling in her career, worked with people from different cultures, different places, because now we get a lot of that 12th house influence with the 10th house as well too. So there's that factor of the 10th house lord, but also because the 10th house lord is Jupiter, now the 10th house lord is right next to Ketu. And Ketu is astrology, metaphysics, spirituality. So the 10th house is ruled by a moksha house, a spiritual house, but also it's near Ketu. And it's near Mercury, which Mercury is also communication and speech and business and expression. And again, she had this really well-known radio show, which was pretty rare at the time for someone to have like an astrological radio show. It was very, ahead of its times. So now it's next to Mercury. She was a writer, she was a speaker, she had a radio show, and it's near Ketu, astrology, metaphysics, spirituality, and kind of scandals as well. So I feel like a lot of Ketu or 12th house influence with the career would be like, oh, maybe there's some, strange, elusive, sort of scandalous stuff going on as well too, because it's more private, it's more hidden, right? Okay, and then also that potential imprisonment, 10th house of career in the 12th house of imprisonment. It's all very interesting, very, very interesting. So that's how we see the astrological career, right? 10th house lord in the 12th house, and it's near Ketu, which rules astrology. If someone gets Ketu influence into their career, there's a high probability that they either go into a strange astrological, metaphysical career, or they work with like film, photography, or television in some regard. I have Ketu in my 10th house, and I was originally a photographer, and I worked with like art and photography and film, and then I went into astrology. So it's like you can't really make this stuff up, right? Ketu in the 10th house, film, photography, or astrology as a career, and I did both, right? So similarly to that, if we get Ketu near the 10th house ruler, it's going to bring that Ketu influence into the career as well too. Astrology, metaphysics, strangeness. It's also near Mercury, writing books, teaching, expression, and the radio show as well too. So that's really her whole career, and we can just see that by the 10th house ruler, right? Even though there's no planets in the 10th, we're looking to the ruler of that 10th house for really potent, accurate information on the career, okay? Now, when I brought up the aspect of Uranus onto the 10th, which is like an astrological career, also a sort of strange, unconventional career, shaking things up in the career, we also get Rahu's influence onto the 10th. So Rahu, you're going to find when it influences the 10th house, people can be very innovative in their career. They can be sort of paving some sort of new path forward. They can be interested in innovation. They can be interested in shaking things up in the work life. They can be interested in, carving out some sort of new path. So even if someone has a more traditional career, if they get Rahu onto the 10th, they can want to do that more traditional career in a way that's like innovative or changing things in some regard. So Now we get Rahu in the 6th, which does give an interest in healing and health and alternative healing methods with that Rahu 6th house, K through 12th house axis very lit up. All of her karma is between the houses of like healing and spirituality and daily work and moksha and spiritual liberation and hidden enemies and public enemies, right? 6th house, 12th house axis is also enemies, but the 12th house is like private enemies that we don't know about. 6th house is like more the legal system, litigation. People that are trying to like come after someone in the court system would be the 6th house, right? So there's also this karmic axis between those two houses. You also find a lot of healers, a lot of astrologers, a lot of people who go into more spiritual, metaphysical fields, healing fields, helping fields, wellness fields, will have something lit up in like their 6th house, 12th house axis. Usually it's like Rahu, Ketu, and you'll see that a lot, because they're being pushed and pulled karmically between healing and helping and spirituality, and there's just going to be this karma that's unraveling between those two houses. Okay, so now we get Rahu in the 6th, and it's aspecting the 10th by its 5th aspect. So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now we get Rahu's influence onto the 10th house. So Rahu on the 10th can give a big career, larger than life career, notoriety in the career, being well known in the career in some regard. So, you know, it's interesting in the sense that that Rahu influence on the 10th also gave her this notorious career as an astrologer, right? Again, she wasn't just like an astrologer who was practicing astrology and no one knew about her. She had scandals. She almost got arrested. She worked with some of the most famous people at the time as a counselor, right? I think she worked with like Joseph Campbell, who I love, by the way. Let me know if you guys want a chart analysis on Joseph Campbell. I can see if he has his birth time online, but he's one of my most favorite people in this lifetime. I love Joseph Campbell so much. So she worked with Joseph Campbell. She worked with J.P. Morgan. She worked with really, really high up sort of people. And that's that Rahu influence on the 10th, right? It's like fame, it's success, it's notoriety, it's, you know, a lot of that more higher up energy can attract like successful people with Rahu's influence on the 10th. So it's not just this like quiet astrologer who no one knew about, right? It's like an astrologer that people definitely knew about, and she's notorious and she's still famous to this day with that Rahu influence onto the 10th. So that's giving us like the well-known career aspect, right? That's giving us the energy of like extremes in the career, ups and downs as well too. So Rahu on the 10th is giving that unconventional, pushing something forward in the career, pushing forward the astrological practice at the time, having some scandals, but also being very well known or notorious or well known in some regard, right? Rahu is going to give more so of that notoriety aspect onto the 10th house. Okay. Now, another way that we can actually see being well-known or being seen in the public is going to be the bright moon that we have. So, interestingly enough, we get Sun in Capricorn next to Mars. Mars loves to be in Capricorn, so this is a strong Mars, and then this is a strong moon because it's in its home sign of Cancer. So we get a strong moon, strong Mars, and they're opposing each other. So we get a Chandra Mangal Yoga, which is business success in business endeavors. But also we get the sun here opposite the moon, and that's a bright moon. So when the sun is opposite the moon, it's a full moon and it's very bright, right? If we get the sun conjunct the moon, that would be a very dim moon. And it says, you know, like ancient text and ancient scripture talks about the brighter the moon, the more ability someone has to be seen or famous or well-known. So she has a very bright moon, right? Sun opposite moon, that's the brightest it can get because it's that full opposition. So, you know, one of my Vedic astrology teachers would tell us that, like, if someone has a bright moon, they walk into a room, they can gain attention, people look at them, they can be well-known, they can be famous in some regard. So we also get that sort of fame-producing or well-known, notorious aspect as well, too. And it's also just so happens that the moon's in Cancer in the 5th house, strong moon in the 5th house. 5th house is actually an astrological house because the 5th house is the house of advising, right? So not many people know that in astrology, but we would actually see the house of astrology I see it as the 8th house for sure, which, by the way, in this chart, we get the 8th house lord in the 12th house. We also get 8th house influence into the career house, right? So 10th house lord is in the 12th house, and now also the 8th house lord is in the 12th house. So we get a lot of moksha influence into the career, right? But I see the 8th house as the astrological house, and also the 5th house, because the 5th house is the house of advisors and advising as well too. So now we get moon in Cancer in its own sign in the 5th house of advising, giving guidance, right? This is also, 5th house is the house of purva punya, or good past life credit, meaning that someone did something good in a past life, with the 5th house being strong as well too. So gifted with advising, the reason that the 5th house is that astrological house is because astrologers are essentially just advisors, right? Advising people, when's the best time to do this, what's the gifts of the chart, right? There's like this advising element, and that's going to be the 5th house of advisors and advising. So we get a strong moon in its own sign in the 5th house of advising and astrology, right? Then it's opposite, a strong Mars. So I've said this in a previous video, Chandra Mangal Yoga is success producing for business. It's good if someone works for themselves, right? It's a business success producing yoga, right? But also it gives someone this very fiery, sort of feisty personality. I have the Chandra Mangal Yoga, and when I was younger, I always talk about this. People used to tell me to be a lawyer, which I do think there's an alternative path where I was a lawyer for sure. I even had a psychic once tell me, she was like, you could have gone into law. And I was like, I know. So you'll find that the Chandra Mangal Yoga, the moon opposite Mars, or Mars conjunct moon, gives this kind of like argumentative, sort of feisty energy in someone, where when they believe in something very strongly, they can be very set on it, and they can be very fiery and very passionate about what they feel in that moment, because the moon is the emotional nature. Mars is just like adding fuel to the fire of the emotions, essentially, right? So it creates this very like fiery, intense emotional experience. Someone can also be very prone to kind of like outbursts of energy and emotion, and they feel very strongly about what they believe in. So it's interesting that she was also really fighting for her career as an astrologer, right? She had to go against these like 3 separate court cases to keep her career as an astrologer, right? So there was also a lot of this like fighting friction theme in her life as well too, with that Mars opposite moon, and then sun is with Mars. I find that when the sun is with Mars, it also gives this energy where someone is very like energized, motivated. It's a very success producing energy when it's well channeled, as long as someone's not just using it to be like overly argumentative or feisty as well in their energy. So that sun Mars is also powerful, moon opposite Mars. Mars is strong in Capricorn. It'd be different if this was like a debilitated Mars, but she has a very strong Mars. So it gives her an ability to fight, for what she believes in very strongly. And she did win in those 3 separate court cases, right? That's going to be a strong Mars. That's going to be strong Mars conjunct Sun opposite the moon. There's this strength of like fighting in this chart as well too. And also Rahu in the 6th house gives all this influence of the 12th onto the 6th. So then we get like Jupiter onto the 6th, Mercury onto the 6th, Venus onto the 6th. We get 3 benefics onto the 6th house of the legal system as well too. So it's very interesting how much is activated between those 2 houses, right? And that was a huge theme in her life and her career, was being accused of fortune telling, and she had to fight against these accusations essentially. So it's very, very interesting. All right. So that's the strength of the moon in its own sign in the 5th house, being an advisor, giving guidance to others. That's going to be a strong moon. Also investments, right? 5th house is the house of investments and stocks as well. And she would advise people on stocks and investments, quite literally, okay? So that's also very interesting. That's that like astrological influence there as well too. Okay. Now, there's also another very specific, interesting aspect of this chart where her father actually died when she was very young. And we can see that because Saturn is in the 9th house, aspecting the sun. Sun is a karaka for the father. Saturn's a malefic influence. It's in the 9th of the father. Can give a very strict father, a very religious sort of father, a father who had strong beliefs, strong morals, kind of that like authoritative energy of the father, but also then it's also aspecting the sun, a karaka for the father. And the 10th house is another house of the father, and it gets ruled by the 12th house of loss, right? And then it's also near Ketu, loss, and she did lose her father at a very young age as well. And also Saturn in the 9th shows that she had some issues or some sort of restrictions around like religion, right? The 9th house is also more traditional religion, and Saturn there gives an energy where someone has some issues or feels restricted at times by like traditional religion. They can change their religion, they can have some sort of shift different than their upbringing, and she grew up in a very religious, sort of conservative household as well too, and she did lose her father at a very young age with that Saturn in the 9th, Saturn aspecting the sun, a karaka for the father, and the 10th house, another house of the father, in the 12th house of loss, and next to Ketu, which is also an indication of like loss as well. Okay, so, it's interesting, right? She had a very successful astrological business. So not only was she an astrologer, she was also very successful in business. Chandra Mangal yoga, business yoga, strong Mars, strong moon opposite the sun, giving an ability to be seen, known, Rahu on the 10th, expanding the career, success in the career, all of that. So that's very interesting as well too, because again, it's not just a practicing astrologer, it's like a very notorious astrologer. All right, so she grew her business, she wrote astrology books, she was good at marketing herself, she consulted in person and had a mail order business, she toured and gave lectures, and by 1930, she was called America's most famous astrologer. And then in the 1930s, she had a radio show that was carried nationwide 3 times a week. Called Your Stars, the show had the potential to reach millions. And then in 1931, she produced booklets for each zodiac sign. Yeah, so she did a lot in her career. She innovated methods to practice astrology and marketing strategies to promote her business. She was very dedicated to the art and occult science of astrology. She had a genuine interest in helping her clients, and her direct client work must have reached thousands, including celebrities J.P. Morgan, Joseph Campbell. Wow, yeah. So she was really bringing astrology to the masses, right? And again, that's that Rahu influence on the 10th. Rahu's expansion. Rahu is like worldwide. It's innovative energy. It's aspecting the 10th house. 10th house is near Mercury, writing, communication, publishing, expression, teaching. It's near Venus, a benefic. So we actually get 2 benefics near the 10th house ruler, right? So that's bringing benefic, positive influence into the career as well too. All right, and then also that ability for her to be a very strong, powerful businesswoman is going to be that Chandra Mangal yoga, moon opposite Mars, strong Mars. Mars is willpower, drive, ambition to succeed. It's near the sun. It's aspected by Saturn. Saturn-Mars aspects, I find, create very powerful, power-driven people who are like able to push through any obstacles, right? You'll find people with a strong Saturn aspecting their Mars, Saturn-Mars conjunction. They can really push through anything that comes their way because they have a lot of that drive and a lot of that discipline as well too. All right, so really, really powerful for essentially everything that she did in her life, in her career. Also, it said there was an importance of friends and people she met in her lifetime. See how we have Mars in its own sign of Capricorn. It's a strong Mars in the 11th, so it can give very powerful connections, powerful friendships, etc. As well, too, it's in that 11th house of groups, friendships, organizations as well. All right, now something that's very interesting is it says that she was really also teaching astrology, teaching other people about astrology, and in her D9 Navamsha, she has Jupiter in the 10th house. Jupiter is a karaka for teaching, spirituality, wisdom. Then her 10th house lord in the D9 is also in the 12th house. So then we get that moksha, spiritual influence in the D1 and the D9. And actually in her D10, we also get Jupiter in the 10th house. And the 10th house lord is in the 8th house with Ketu and the sun sitting there. So you're not going to be able to see like the house numbers in the Vargas charts, but just know that this is the 10th house. Jupiter's there, teaching, spirituality, wisdom, philosophy. And then it gets disposited by this house where we get the sun and then Ketu. So Ketu is metaphysics, spirituality. The sun is leadership, working for yourself as well too. Right? And that was her whole career. That was it. So we see these things multiple times. It's not just once. It's not just twice. It's like over and over again, right? Which is actually how you have to do chart analysis. You have to see something many times to make like a solid statement or a solid prediction. All right, so we see it all. We see her whole life story. We see the astrological career. We see the big career, larger than life career. We see the fame. We see the success. We also see the business success, because this is the thing I find very often is people think that someone is an astrologer, someone is working for themselves, and they forget that there's like the business side of it as well too, right? So it's not just anyone could be, not anyone, but a lot of people could be interested in becoming astrologers or working in the field of astrology, but you also have to have a sort of like business sense about you as well too. And this is one of those charts where she has a very strong business minded side. Chandra Mangal Yoga. I've said it once, I'll say it again in many videos. Moon conjunct Mars or moon opposite Mars is business. It's a business success producing yoga. I have Chandra Mangal Yoga, moon opposite my Mars. When I was younger, I would tell everyone, one day I'm going to start a business. Like I used to just say it to everyone. And I remember working at this lemonade stand when I was like really young. And I came up with these innovative methods to get people to buy more. And I remember I made like close to $200. And I was like, I love this feeling. Like it was like, it lit me up. I was like, I love business. When I was like working a lemonade stand, it was so funny. But that's the Chandra Mangal Yoga, right? It gives this natural inclination towards business. And, you know, I don't necessarily know the exact reason why. It's just a yoga and astrology that like I just trust why it works because I've seen it work. But my sort of theory on it is that Mars is energy. It's drive, it's willpower. The moon is like the emotional nature. And if someone has a moon, Mars aspect, conjunction, or opposition, they're probably pretty set in like what they want to do and what they feel in this lifetime. Okay, so it's almost hard for the Chandra Mangal Yoga, moon conjunct Mars, moon opposite Mars, for someone to do what someone is telling them to do. Okay, so that's why they're more drawn into business fields. If someone has Mars with the moon or opposite the moon, trust me and comment down below if you guys have this aspect, but you do not like being told what to do. Okay, let me tell you. And anytime someone tries to work in more traditional fields and they have strong Mars energy in itself, right? Mars opposite the moon, Mars with the sun, they're going to be very much annoyed by being told what to do by others. So that's why I see it as like a business success yoga, but there's probably other reasons as well too. Okay, but I just find a lot of like Mars influence in someone's chart makes someone very set in what they want to do. It's a little bit more, I see it this way and I'm just going to do it that way. And I'm speaking from personal experience where like when I would work normal jobs, someone would tell me what to do. I'd be like, this is not really hitting for me. Like, I think I'm going to be my own, you know, boss, essentially. So that's that Mars influence onto people's personal planets, especially the moon, which is like our emotional nature. It's like, it's very much focused on what someone feels that they want to do in this lifetime. So that's why I see that as a business yoga and astrology, because someone is more drawn to their own pursuits. They want to be their own boss. They want to work for themselves because they're kind of set in their own ways a little bit and kind of fiery at times as well too. So and that's what you'll find with a lot of Mars influence onto personal planets as well. All right, so yeah, really beautiful chart for exactly what her whole life was all about. And she really lived out her purpose, right? And the reason why I love doing these Vedic chart analysis videos of people who were successful or notorious or well-known in some regard is because we get to see someone and what it looks like when someone really embodies their Vedic astrological chart, right? So we see the chart of someone who's meant to be this astrologer, someone who's meant to write and teach Mercury, Ketu, Jupiter, write and teach about metaphysics, write and teach about astrology and spirituality, and she lived out that purpose so strongly, right? And then we get to see, like, wow, isn't that so cool to see the alignment that can happen when someone is living in that dharma, living in that purpose, right? So that's why it's really cool to do chart analysis videos where someone was very well known, because it's like, okay, they did it, lived out their purpose, and now we get to understand the dharma and the karmic energy that's in the astrological chart that pushed that to happen, right? So it's really, really cool. Also, she has Ketu in her 7th and her T9 Navamsha. Her 7th house lord is near Ketu. Was she like always dating like spiritualists or like some strange spiritual relationships? Okay, not much is coming up through research, but she probably at some point was attracted to very like spiritual relationships. Ketu in the 7th with Neptune in the 7th. That's interesting. Very interesting. All right, so that was her whole life story. Yes, it was. There it all is. And these are really those beautiful, like, minute aspects of chart analysis that we just can't get in Western astrology. It's like these very minute things. And it's the reason why I love Vedic astrology so much. I'm having this resurgence, not even resurgence because it never went anywhere, but even this like higher level of love for Vedic astrology lately for whatever reason. I just think it's the most beautiful system of astrology that I have ever studied, I've ever practiced, and I do think it's going to be the way of astrology going forward. But it is really the system of astrology that's going to give us these in-depth, really in-depth analysis aspects. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know, comment down below what y'all thought about this chart analysis video. If you guys have any suggestions, I'm always open, and as long as someone's birth time is online and it's accurate, we can do in-depth videos. I also offer sessions where I do this with your personal chart, which are some of my favorite sessions, actually. I love doing the recorded chart analysis videos because people can keep it forever and they can always come back to it and rewatch it. And things will also click later on as well, too. I get so many clients where, like, during the session, I'll say something and they're like, oh, I don't know what that is, or I'm not sure about that. And then they'll come back to me and they'll be like, oh, I know what it is now, or this thing happened. So it's really cool to be able to like keep that, come back to it as well too. All right, hope you guys enjoyed. Comment, like, and subscribe for more content coming soon. I'm sending all the love, all the best vibes, and we will talk soon, guys. Bye.